Welcome everybody in this beautiful day here in the Netherlands at least, and unfortunately it's still remote. We were very happy to invite you to our office at another day. It's something we do most of the time. But on the other hand, it's very good to share knowledge also online. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to this our webinar. When you have any questions, you can put them on the chat so that we can see if we can answer some questions after the presentations or at the end of the webinar. And yeah, as a host, I would like to welcome Enza and Arthur. Enza from Forrester and Arthur from itsme. And I think it's an interesting hour to discuss the topic identified signing. Just to show you the agenda. So I will do a short intro to explain a little bit about identified signing and how we look at this. Then Enza will guide us through their view and vision on e-signatures and the reports he recently finished. And then Arthur, as one of the identities in Europe, will explain a little bit about itsme and the developments. And then hopefully around 12 we will wrap it up. All the presentations and the webinar will be recorded, so you don't have to write everything down. We will send you the details afterwards. So yeah, me as a person, already involved for about 30 years in this space. I'm very intrigued by the question, how can we make digital transactions legally binding? And how can we make sure that this is going to work for companies and consumers? So that's why I'm also one of the founders of Evidos. And basically the goal of Evidos, besides our company goal, is that we really strive to make this happen, so that at least around 2025, any business process can be offered in an online way with the same or even better digital evidence. So this is basically the goal that we are working on from our perspective, and also why we want to stimulate our colleagues and other companies to solve this for the consumers and companies. So when you say the right evidence, then in our opinion, there's a few things that is important for that. So of course, as a consumer or as a company, you need to make sure that you know what the risks is of doing transactions online or being online, and behind that risk you can choose the methods to mitigate those risks. On the other hand, there's also regulators that demand a few things, and there's of course the legislation about stating how you can do certain things in a physical way, but also how you can do those things in a digital way. And that is basically the recipe, what we think is needed, and also the requirement for doing business online. And that's also something that we described in one of our white papers. So yes, identified signing, I think we all see and we all know that in the past decades, we're already able to do a lot of digitalization. And most of those transactions, when you look at digital signing, were done based on a scribble signature or somebody say a basic signature. But what you see now, that even end users and also the companies looking in this evidence requirement understand that the scribble is not providing the right evidence, and the demand is changing. Of course, it's your own risk appetite what you want to accept. You could also leave it away so that you just accept everything instead of validating the signature or the individual. But in our opinion, the movement from scribble to identified signing can be very compared like the movement from passwords moving towards multi-factor login. Also, in that area, you see the demand for the end users. You see the technology developments, and you also see the regulators demanding a new level of evidence. But why is that happening now? Well, basically, what we see is that the techniques to enroll identities and to use signatures is becoming quite easy. So not only in using it, but also in the enrollment phase. So when you want to issue a digital identity, the quick enrollment and identity validation can almost be real time. And that's really a catalyst for identified signing. You also see that the mobile phone, not only in this area, but also in other areas, of course, is a very handy, unique personal token, and makes the distribution of identities and the usage very easy and low cost. Well, it's of course also the multi-channel area. So the QR code is helping us to hand off to the mobile phone, do your identity signing, and then you can continue whether you are in store or on the web. Well, we also like to contribute, but there's some nice open standards becoming the new normal and helping for companies to integrate in an easy manner. And also the legal frameworks are changing, and they are demanding a more identified signing. What we also see, and that I think is very interesting, is that even the customer journey for identified signing is becoming more easy than the basic scribble signature. So like Apple Pay and other methods, entering your personal code, or at least confirming, is much more convenient than putting some kind of scribble in a way on a touch device. Where everybody always says it's not their personal signature. So I think that is also an important one. Well, what we think, but we can discuss about this, and maybe Enza can reflect on this, is that Europe is quite ahead in creating this ecosystem. There's a lot of identities in different member states. Sometimes it's the banks, sometimes it's the telcos, sometimes it's the government. And what recently was also announced about 2 weeks ago is that they will strive for even a better identity ecosystem in the coming year. So based on that, and I think that is also an interesting one, is we see at the moment 3 categories of identities that are arising. So first of all, it's the EIDs created in the different member states, and they are basically validated or classified on the Evidos regulation, and then it says substantial or high. On the other hand, you also see the digital ID documents, or let's say the ID documents, are becoming much more digital. So when you look at the passport and the driver license, basically they are getting more and more digital because of the NFC chips that are included in these documents. And in combination with some biometric validation, this basically looks like a good alternative for a digital identity. And the final group is basically the qualified signing IDs. So sometimes people put those together with the Evidos high identities, and sometimes they are. It is possible to use it from both ways. But when you look at the regulations, and there's still a difference. So you could have an Evidos high identity, but still it is not possible to use it for qualified signing. So the third group is more or less the qualified identity providers, conform the itsme norms that were already introduced around the 90s. And to conclude on that, and also I think important for companies is that basically what we think that will happen in the coming year is that we need to find out which one will be the favorable methods. And there's a few pros and cons, and I want to give them to you. So basically what you see is that the Evidos EIDs are quite friendly to use and easy to enroll. But of course, mainly categorized in the Evidos EU space. And also, there isn't a lot of law where it's embedded. So one first example is in the anti-money laundering law in the EU, where it is stated that an Evidos level high can also be used to identify an end customer. When you look at the digital ID document, or the ID documents becoming digital, we all know that it is more internationally aligned. And we also see that it is friendly to use with NFC and biometrics, but the question is everybody willing to walk around with his passport all the time and using it in the context of some processes? But of course, in the regulations, a lot of time, a national identity card or a national identity document is mentioned to be accepted for doing business online. So that is where they are more ahead. And then the third group are the qualified signing IDs, which is not an identity document. So to make this a little bit more clear, when you are required to have a legally identification, the qualified signing IDs are at the moment not an officially accepted ID document. But on the other hand, you see that in the legal frameworks, due to that it was already introduced in the 90s, there's already a lot of processes that accept a qualified signature as being the same as a wet signature, and therefore it can be used in a lot of processes already. So these are basically my hints in these developments. I now want to invite Enza to take us through their vision. So I'll make sure that I'll stop.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here as a guest today. And I'm going to share my screen because I have prepared some slides for you, for the audience today, and is a little bit of data analysis that we have done, and also is a presentation about some trends that we see in this space. So the first and the starting point for the work that I do is always looking at what happens in the customer's world, in the consumer's world, because regulators are an important driver for this kind of trends and new technology. But it's also true that consumers need to adopt this technology. And I think it's very interesting at this point in time, really, to see how consumers are changing behavior and how they are demanding this kind of digital interaction more and more. And to be honest, they don't really care if the process would require a lot of compliance or a lot of special security needs. They want just to be able to engage with businesses digitally. And then it's businesses that need to take care of all the complexity that comes with it. So first, I want to show you how in the last year, consumers in Europe have radically changed the way they approach businesses and the way they buy products. 49% in France are saying the pandemic has completely changed the way I shop. And to that, it has also changed the kind of products they shop. It means, and you will see in my following slide, that even if they have to go to a bank to open a bank account, to ask for a loan, there is no stopping them in doing these things online, virtually, and they are doing that. 63% in the UK said that they use technology more than ever before to engage with company, and 54% in the UK said that the pandemic has completely changed their purchasing priority. So again, what they buy. And I want to show you these. We asked consumers, again in Europe, to tell us how did they apply for a bank account in the past year. As you can see, in the UK, 80% said we applied for a bank account online. We're using a computer, a smartphone, tablet, so multi-channel engagements. And you can see Spain, France, Italy. Consumers have just developed now this familiarity, this education, that they can open a bank account online with their laptop. And then in a similar way, we ask consumers how they apply for a mortgage. And as you can see, again, a big portion of the population across these European countries saying we did that with a computer, with a smartphone, with a tablet. These operations that in the past, those are clearly financial operations. And in the past, people were used to have that face-to-face engagement, and they felt that was the safest way of doing it. That perception has completely changed. Consumers realize that they can have a very safe engagement with a bank using their computer, then smartphone, then tablet. And you can see here the change in that behavior. But this is not only what happened in the last year. You might say, well, of course, we were all in a lockdown. So if people wanted to ask for a bank account, they had to do it online. Well, I'll take that, but then look at this data instead. We asked them, what do you think you will do in the future? How this year of pandemic has changed your behavior for good? Because we also know that the pandemic now has been long enough for consumers to actually develop habits. They are going to be there and stick for the future. And this data actually explains that. So it would be a mistake to believe that some behaviors are only driven by the pandemic and will live only during the pandemic. What we see is that the pandemic has educated consumers to change behavior for the long term. And so we asked these consumers in Europe, how frequently do you think you will go to a bank in the future? And as you can see, 25%, 1 in 4 is saying definitely, I will go less to a bank to have that face-to-face engagement. I don't need it anymore. And in a similar way, we have been investigating about the use of digital tools to manage finances. Again, I cover privacy together with digital identity and e-signature, and I can tell you that managing financial data is always a very sensitive thing for consumers. And the fact that they are saying we have become dependent now from digital tools and services to manage finances, again, it describes a very important change in the way consumers are going to behave in the future. How are businesses changing? How are businesses reacting to these new habits of the consumer? We have written this research some time ago, probably a few months ago, that actually suggests this idea of the new normal. We have investigated how the pandemic has changed businesses and technology for the next 5 to 10 years. So very important, long-standing changes. And one of the things that really emerged from the research is that for businesses, it will be important, it will be essential to really be able to create hybrid experiences where the physical world, the offline world is going to meet in a seamless way with the online digital interaction. This is the way consumers are going to behave in the future. This is the kind of hybrid engagement that we want to have in the future. Therefore, businesses will need to orchestrate these experiences that are really a mix of offline and online engagement. And we then investigated a little bit more about what are the priorities for European businesses in the next year. And you can see here, there are probably 2 elements that we were expecting to see. 30% say my key priority is improving the experience of my customer. And then if you see at the bottom of that list, they are saying also improving the experience of the employees, another very important trend. Our research shows that there is this very direct relationship between the employee experience and the quality of the customer experience that they deliver and the revenue for the company. So we were not surprised to see that there is this priority around the experience. But then look at the yellow bars. Those, to me, indicate digital transformation and how companies are prioritizing digital transformation to do just this. That is digital transformation to me. That is to be different, differentiate in the market, differentiate your services, your product, differentiate the engagement with your customers so that you are faster to market, so that you can deliver those superior hybrid experiences that customers are asking for, and that they clearly identify your brand as different from everyone else. That is the promise of digital experience. And another element is about innovation. We know that with investment to improve digital experience, to deliver the hybrid experience that we have discussed, emerging technology is coming to the forefront even more than we have seen in the past. And we have asked organizations and say that innovating is a key priority for them. We have asked them about which are the key actions that you are going to take. And for 35%, they say is improving the understanding of customer needs so that we can serve them, but it's very much investing in emerging technology and improving collaboration with partners. And this is the point that I want to make, because at this point of this presentation, you might be asking, but great, so consumers are changing behavior, companies are responding, really focusing on the experience, focusing on digital transformation, but how do I do it? Where is the switch? I want to become a digital business. How do I do it? And that point about partners and improving collaboration with partners is also a key element here. This is why I say that the time for a digital signature is now, because digital signature and the services that come with digital signature can really help businesses to digitize processes, even complex processes, in a way that is quite fast, that is reliable, and there is really playing into that offline, online, hybrid experience delivery. And it doesn't matter if your processes are complex. These vendors, these companies can really help you digitize even processes that are complex. This is my definition of this market. When I think about the digital signature space, I'm thinking about products and services that enable the digital transformation of business processes and operations, transactions, even when they require a legally binding agreement between parties. And then the most important element probably of this definition, the fact that the parties to the agreement have had their identity verified, attributed and contextually verified, which is very important. So if you were to think about what is a digital transaction and how this digital signature can help me digitize my business processes, this is the way you want to think about it. You need to verify identities. If I come to your business and I want to ask for a mortgage, for example, you will need to make sure that Enza is me, that I am the person I say I am. And so you will need to verify my identity. Probably if I'm asking for a mortgage, you want to verify my identity with a high level of assurance. That high level of assurance depends on the risk of the transaction, and I'll go there in a moment. But this first idea is really verify the identity of the parties to the agreement. And then you need, for this party actually to transact, you need to enable that transaction to happen. And then there are a number of things that will happen after the transaction. For example, you want to store the document. You want to make sure that no changes are further made to the document. You will maybe allow an internal auditor, an external auditor, a regulator to audit these documents. And so there is a part of actions, there is some action that needs to happen after the signature. And what also these vendors can help, the digital signature vendor can help you do, is to build this yellow box that I have in my slide, which is my governance wrapper. If I were to come to a bank and someone would verify my identity, they would take some notes about the documents, the validity of my documents, but a lot of that interaction wouldn't be recorded anyway. There wouldn't be metadata about that transaction, about my identity, about what happens after. But with this platform, actually, you get so much rich metadata that actually can help you as a business for your compliance duty, for your security duties. It really helps to go back and say, okay, this is the transaction, this is the way these identities were verified, this is the means we use for the verification, these are the documents attached. This is the transaction. We can tell you the time the transaction happened, who were the parties, which means were used. You have so much richness in the metadata to really create the right governance around processes, especially if they require a high level of assurance, high level of compliance and security. The market, it might feel like a complex market. There are many different vendors in this market. You have seen the slides from Kik just a minute ago and see how so many players are there. But this is my attempt to really explain a market that should be, and it is in reality, more simple or simpler than it might feel at the beginning. You have what I call the digital trust platforms. Those are platforms that can really verify the identities of the party to an agreement with a very high level of assurance. Those are the vendors that can issue an authenticity certificate for identity, and that identity certificate for identity, and Kik also mentioned that in his portion of the webinar, those identity certificates are not only a very strong way, the strongest way for digital identities and identity verification, but they are also attached to the signature. So the link between the parties and the signature of the transaction is very, very strong. And this is typically required in a number of anti-money laundering processes, know your customer regulation, and other processes that have very strong regulatory requirements attached to them. They also offer a multitude of ways in which that identity verification can be done. So don't think of these like a very cumbersome process, because it's not like that, at least not anymore. And they offer a number of different options for that identity verification to happen in a way that is secure, that is compliant, but is also a good experience for the customer. And then you have the digital transformation platforms. These vendors typically don't offer that very high level of identity verification, at least they don't offer that natively from their solutions. They have a variety of identification methods, but those are lower assurance than the certificate. They typically offer a simple e-signature, so not advanced signature, not qualified signature, certainly not qualified signature. And they also have a strong platform that allows collaboration, workflow automation support, and they help companies orchestrate these processes. And then you have the e-signature specialists. Those are vendors that really, the core of their offerings around simple e-signature and very simple identity verification. Typically is an email address, for example. So you can imagine these vendors being adequate for everything that doesn't have any process, that doesn't have a lot of compliance requirements in it, doesn't have specific governance requirements in it. So simple, low risk transaction, low-risk processes. And then you have the PKI specialists. They typically are vendors that have their public key infrastructure, and they use that to provide the identity certificate and to develop capabilities that leverage their cryptographic tools and their cryptographic capabilities. I want to spend just some time before I give back the floor to Kik, just to talk about some of the benefits. I mentioned as part of this presentation some already, but I want to start from this improvement of the customer experience. That was the priority for businesses we have seen, but the reality is that there is still sometimes when I talk to clients, the misconception that if you're using a very high level of assurance on the identity, that is an experience that is not as smooth as we would expect. But that is something that I would say is not accurate. I have seen so much improvement and so much evolution in the way actually identity can be verified at a very high level of assurance and still delivering a very good experience to customer. And also remember, when you work with a digital provider, you are going to also choose what's the best way of identifying that identity, what's the best way of transact with the reference to the risk level associated to a process. So you are going to work with a different set of approaches depending on the risk level associated to a process. So you can really kind of fine-tune the experience with the need from a compliance and security perspective. There is a strong efficiency gains, and also there is the potential to enable innovation. As we have seen, this is the core of digitizing processes, and so really can help companies kickstart the experience and kickstart that digital and hybrid experience for their customers and for their employees too. And then one more consideration about, and again, I want to be clear here, because I know that sometimes when we have to digitize these processes that are complex, we might feel that, I don't know if digital is the right way. And I want just to clarify the fact that the capabilities of some of the vendors really can help improving the transactions governance, as I mentioned before, increase security. We know with this solution, you can really help decrease the identity fraud, for example, as the way you identify customers is strong enough for that identity fraud to really decrease. And they also deliver on a number of compliance requirements that we have mentioned. Briefly, I just want to give you just a few takeaways as you are thinking about the solution. Probably you're using them already, or you are thinking to invest in some of them. Develop a risk-based approach to determine the right processes, technology, and oversight. There will be some processes that have a high risk associated with them, and you want to offer that high level of security, identity, compliance. There are other processes that may be just a less complex operation, and maybe you want to offer an advanced signature or a simple signature, but just be able to understand from your processes which kind of solution is the best option is key. So start with that risk-based approach on your processes. Actually work with the providers to really understand in which way you can innovate. You are going to digitize a process, but maybe there are other processes that will be jump off the process you have digitized. Maybe there are other opportunities for further innovation. So work with them to really think not just about digitize a single process, but really start to have that vision about how much innovation this solution can deliver to me, how much innovation this solution can actually enable, and maybe that can happen in very different ways in your organization. One thing that I often see in organization is that there are a number of different providers for the kind of solution, and then it becomes a little bit of shadow IT proliferation. And I always encourage customers to have a more comprehensive tech strategy around this digital capability so that they can avoid having multiple providers within their organization for a single processes. And so instead having this more comprehensive approach can really help to avoid that inefficiency and the shadow IT proliferation. Assess improvements in your customer experience with qualitative and quantitative metrics. This is very key because we are talking about hybrid experiences. At the end of the day, this has to be done to make your customers happier. And so make sure that when you develop KPI and metrics and when you are describing success, you make sure that you are considering the customer experience and employee experience as part of your KPI. And then make also, again, that extend that approach to your employee experience too, as this has become a priority for businesses. With this, I have completed my session. I will be back later on for some Q&A, and I can give the floor back to Arthur, I think.
Thank you, Enza. Yeah, I'm not able to turn my cam on, but thank you for the nice presentation. I don't see a lot of questions yet in the chat, so we can do that after the presentation of Arthur. But maybe one question for you: when you look at the developments of identities. I was quite strong in my statement that Europe was taking the lead there. Looking at your research, it was worldwide, and Forrester is looking more broader. What's your opinion on that statement?
Yes, Kik, I think that is definitely, I agree with that statement. When we talk about digital identities, there is no question that Europe is actually the market that is most mature around. And to be fair, I think that there is also a difference between the UK and mainland Europe, and I see the best, more mature example around digital identities in mainland Europe. And there is a new potential new update to the eIDAS regulation regulation that you also mentioned that potentially can really change the game, because we are talking about giving all European citizens their digital identities in a way that is flexible enough for new use cases, in a way that is privacy protecting, because those identities would come with attributes. And for example, if I need to buy something that a bottle of wine and they want to know if I'm over 18, I don't need to disclose the entire identity. I can just have an attribute and say yes or not, you're over 18. So it's revolutionary from a privacy protection perspective. And then also it's quite pervasive. If you are thinking that, we are envisioning probably, according to the draft of the European Commission, about 80% of citizens having some form of digital identity in the next 5 to 8 years. So it is a really big change. And again, talking about Europe's maturity around these topics.
Thank you, Enza. Yeah, so I think that was a good hint also to Arthur, being a European identity provider with itsme. So welcome, Arthur, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you for having us, Kik. I want to thank you and Martijn especially for inviting us to be here. And Enza, thank you for these insights. It was lovely to see. So welcome, everybody. I will tell you something about itsme Digital, a company from Belgium. I'm Arthur Dollo, the Sales and Account Manager for the Netherlands. I will just dive right into it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out via the chat, because I'll be happy to answer them. So maybe a bit of background information before we go into depth. itsme has been founded 4 years ago by these companies. They are still let's say the owners, the founders of itsme. So the biggest Belgian banks and some telcos are included. They founded Belgian Mobile ID, and one of their products is itsme. And it's the reference, as you can see, for digital identification, authentication, and signatures in Europe. And at this moment, we have over 3 million users and counting. As I said, Enza mentioned that in her presentation. Currently, of course, because of the COVID pandemic, a lot of companies are going digital, but also governments. And because of the vaccination passport that is coming out, we'll see an exponential growth in itsme users in Belgium. So we're now at 3.2 million users, and probably by the end of the year, we will reach 9 million users, with a lot of Belgians, of course, using it to relate to their vaccination passports. So the journey started in 2017, and in 2018, the Belgian government already acknowledged, let's say, the potential that itsme had, and they gave itsme access to their government sources, in a sense that, inhabitants can actually reach out to several data sources of the government and use that in whichever context they need, in all kinds of verticals, from health, banking, government, education, and so on. So it's growing rapidly, and itsme is also active in Luxembourg at the moment. And 1 month ago, we started going live in the Netherlands, and I will tell you a bit about that more the coming minutes. So why would you choose itsme as a digital identity provider? Mainly to identify, authenticate, give your consent, and sign whatever you need to do in an everyday process. I think that's one of the most relevant things to keep in mind. An identity solution can only work if you use it on a regular basis. If you use such an app, let's say once a month, once every 6 months, it won't fly, and it will be hardly adopted by any country or any citizen or at any company that you use it in. So what are the challenges, and what is our mission when we started itsme? Back then, we saw that there were too many passwords and they were not secure enough. As Enza mentioned, I think as well, itsme is widely used to make sure there's no online fraud, and that we protect ourselves for any cybersecurity risk that we can encounter as a company or as a government. I think one of the other things that is really important is to actually state and that we can show that we are who we say we are. So if we log in with itsme instead of a regular username and password, we can verify that it's actually Arthur that you're talking to and not somebody else. And I think that the new security and privacy regulations from Europe, looking at the GDPR, eIDAS, but also the upcoming eIDAS 2.0, will help companies evolve in a sense that the regulation will be more tight than ever. So we have to be compliant, and these kind of solutions will help you reach that level of compliancy, but also make sure that you can provide optimal service to your customers or citizens in general. So what kind of functionalities does itsme have? And I think these are the main functionalities that we provide at the moment. I will share a bit more information on the future of itsme at the end of this presentation. But to start off with, we have the, let's say, the simple sign up. So you can verify your identity based on the identity given by you to you by the government. Then we have a login functionality. We have a confirm functionality. As Kik said, I think in the future you won't have to use a scribble, but you can also use a confirm or consent button to sign any kind of document that you need to sign in that case. And that also relates to point 4, where we say, and we trust in a qualified signature. As mentioned before, I think it's really important to have these high level of assurance functionalities within your app, because we believe that's the future. So going a bit further, I think the mobile centricity of itsme is really relevant in this case. As you can see, and I'm now speaking mainly about Belgium, is that 40% of the Belgian people currently have itsme on their mobile phone, and they use it almost on a daily basis. So that shows how important it is to have an app that's easily accessible, easy to use, and also that you can use it cross sectors. Because I think that's the most relevant success of itsme the last couple of years, is that they not have only been used in the public sector, but they have also been used in the private sector. And as you can see, we're even beating Spotify with being the more downloaded by Belgians currently. So the security and compliance is a big issue, as Enza stated as well. So we're GDPR compliant, we are Evidos compliant on the level of assurance high, we're PSD2 compliant, we're also part of the FATF and the AML laundering and financial inclusion part, where we advise them in how to move forward. The same goes with the European Commission, and we're a trust service provider as stated below. One of the things that's really important for itsme is that it's always secure and that we're compliant. So we have done everything that we can currently in the context of Europe to be compliant with their regulations and directives. And we're also in talks about the European digital identity, as mentioned by Kik, to see how we can help out there and how we can ensure that all those kind of identity schemes that we have on a national level become interoperable, so that we have a European digital identity that will be sustainable and that we can hold towards the future. One of the other elements that we saw in the new legislation around Evidos 2.0 is that data sharing is coming in. So as Kik mentioned, I think there are several components that will determine if we will be successful as a company or as a government. One is identifying people, making sure that you're talking to the people and person that he or she says that they are. The second one is digital signature, making sure that we can optimize those processes compared to the paperwork that needs to be done currently, especially in the Netherlands. And the third one will be that we are able to share data, but we as a customer or citizen are in control of that data. We can get that data from trusted sources, let's say from the government, but we will be able to share that with whoever we want to share that with. So that's a bit of a background when it comes to the security and compliancy of itsme. This is a bit more of a deep dive on how that works. So we have 3 pillars, as I said: security, user experience and interoperability, data privacy and control. And I think one of the most important things that you can see on this slide is that the second point, user experience and interoperability. itsme currently uses a one-time identification process based on NFC readout and a liveness check. So where the Belgian citizens in general had to use their EID card from the Belgian government, now all ICAO passports across the globe can also use itsme. So what happens is, if you want to onboard, is you scan your machine readable zone strip on your passport. Then you can scan your NFC chip on your passport with your mobile phone. If that has been done, there will be a liveness check based on flashing images, and there will be, let's say, a copy made of your face, and they will check that, and they will compare it with the picture that was actually on your NFC chip of your passport. And that way we can onboard customers or citizens within 2 minutes. And from there on, of course, you can start digitizing the rest of your processes. So I think that's a really important feature that we added the last year, and that will help us expand internationally. So coming back to, of course, the topic of this webinar is itsme has chosen qualified electronic signature from the start. So of course we understand that you can have other versions of signatures, but we believe that the highest quality level is needed when you look at the future. That's where we work closely with Evidos the last couple of years, and we will surely work with them towards the future. And our qualified electronic signature in the Netherlands will be available from the 1st of October. And I will tell you a bit more about that when we are at another slide later on. So where can you use itsme? As you can see, we do believe in partner ecosystems, and we have a lot of partners across Belgium, and this will be expanding, as I said, to Luxembourg, but also the Netherlands. On the longer term, of course, we want to expand to other European countries, as we are EI certified, GDPR certified, and we are closely connected to the European Commission and all that they're, let's say, creating around EI 2.0. We thought it would be welcome to show you what kind of networks we have and what kind of customers we have in this case. So as you can see, it's all different kinds of verticals that use itsme in many ways. So in the end, they don't only use, for example, the identification functionality of itsme, but sometimes they use all the functionalities in order to digitize their processes entirely. And that will help us, of course, make sure that people use itsme on a daily basis. And it's easier to use for those companies as well, reducing their cost, the personnel cost in general, but also upgrading their compliancy to all kinds of directives or regulations within Belgium, but also in Europe. How can itsme add value to your business or your government? I think that's one of the main questions that you need to ask if you want to start using a digital identity solution. What does it add, and what kind of problems can we solve using such a solution? As we see a lot of people having problems with simply the login to a website of a government, to make statements, or to simply register at a hotel. So what we currently do, and you can see that on this slide, is that in several verticals we use itsme just to make sure that we share a bit of identity data. And as Enza stated, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to share all your identity data. It could merely be several attributes to make sure you're allowed into the hotel, to make a statement, or make an online buy to make sure that you get that product that you want. It also replaces the current KYC processes. As we all know, most of the time it's a paper process. You have to give a copy of your identity document, and based on next to it, you will also have to fill in all kinds of forms, and you either have to go to a desk, or you have to send it to a government or a bank. By showing you what I've done before, you can have like a fully digital process with the onboarding, but you can also relate that to your internal processes, where we can use several itsme functionalities to make sure that the customers that are there are verified, and that every step in the process that you take, that you can give your consent to the data that is shared. Another one I think it's important is, of course, the login, as I stated. Just to log in at websites, at the delivery box, in your news account. So all kinds of accounts that you have, or all kinds of contracts that you have, you could, instead of having all those separate usernames and passwords, you could start using itsme in that case. So even if you go to the gym, why would you need a gym card if you can have itsme on your telephone and maybe enter the gym without having to show your card, but just simply scanning your phone or showing your phone in that case. I think one of the most important things is nowadays, and especially with the GDPR, is that we give our consent to the data that we share. So you also want to confirm several transactions. For example, the one that you see here on the screen is if you enter your timesheet and you want to confirm that, itsme, can provide that button within your system to make sure that you actually approve your timesheets. We can also order movie on demand. All kinds of systems like Netflix and Amazon have their own systems currently, but you can see there's a demand coming up from the European Commission to make sure that we also have European players in that context, and that we make sure that they comply with Evidos regulations concerning these kind of entertainment services. Signing, I think that's one of the most important attributes that we have currently. If you look at the Netherlands, the current situation is that we can't sign digitally on a qualified level. Yet it's not broadly accepted. So one of the most important things that you'll see happening in the Netherlands from the 1st of October on is that together with Evidos, with Kik, Civco and their colleagues, we will be pushing for signing digitally with either itsme, of course, other solutions that will be coming out there, but they have to be qualified signatures. In Belgium, this is a big success already with a lot of signatures on a yearly basis. But for the Netherlands, this will be a game changer. It will relate to all kinds of government processes, but also to private company processes where we can simply sign a document, a contract, or whatever we need to sign. We're currently speaking to some notaries in the Netherlands, some banks, some governments to make sure that we start implementing this in the 4th quarter of this year, just to make sure, that customers have a better experience digitally and that it also optimizes the processes internally for those companies and governments. But what are the benefits? Enza mentioned some benefits from her side of the story to after the research that I have done. Some benefits for the clients are mainly being in control and having full transparency on what happens with your data and which kind of data you can share with all kinds of people that you need to. I think that's a really important step forward. Data minimization in this case is always behind the scenes. We don't want to share information that doesn't need to be shared with any company or any government. And I think the onboarding process is as easy as it can get. For example, nowadays you will have to go, for example, to a government office. You have to show your identity. They will either make a copy of your identity. All those kind of things are in the past if you start using the itsme digital onboarding using an ICAO compliant passport. For a business or for a government in general, I think it will create less cost as we can digitize processes, as I mentioned. That will, of course, bring down the cost. But on the other side, it will also increase your exposure in the sense that if people start using this on a daily basis, they will be eagerly returning to you as it is easy to access either your website or your services. And we have seen that in our own research, that a lot of people do enjoy the digital services like itsme compared to the physical processes that we now have in place for banks, governments, health institutions, and other insurers, for example. Maybe coming back to the first statement that I made, as you have seen, we have several functionalities as itsme, but we see a shift in the new digital identity era at the moment. We're working closely with the World Bank on this. And one of the most important shifts that we see is that most of the time people have a negative experience online because it's always centered on the business needs or the government's needs. And what we're doing currently, of course, with itsme, and we have been doing for the last 4 years, is that our solution is user-centric, giving the user the control, but also giving the user the right to own their data and share the data with who they want. I think that's a really important shift in digital identity the last couple of years. And I think coming back to what we stated earlier, having a secure, compliant digital identity does not only help your customer or citizen, but it also helps you as a government or business, as you don't have to check that constantly and it's fully digitized, so you can have that information at hand when you want to. Another shift that we see currently is that we're now speaking about digital identities of people in general, using the digital identity in business processes or government processes, but the scope will broaden in the coming years. We're in the era of the Internet of Things. So we will have to start relating identities of people to identities of organizations on which, on behalf you will act. We will also relate it to identities of devices or things, just to make sure that we can prevent online fraud, but also that we can protect our companies, but also our devices within the company against cybercrime. So this is one of the main changes that we'll see the coming years. So we won't only focus on the identity of people, but we will mainly start focusing also on the identity of entities, devices, and things. And that's really important that we include a digital signature as well, as we want to make sure that everybody who acts on behalf of a company has that rights to move forward as well and to do some transactions. So I think this new ecosystem is already forming. The European Commission is already preparing legislation for these kind of things. And I think we'll see the first of these kind of directives and regulations around 2024. So we have to start preparing for this as a government or as a business in the Netherlands or in another country in Europe. I spoke a bit about data sharing in the start of my presentation. What we're currently doing at itsme is that we're looking at how we can make data sharing easy and safe. As mentioned before, there are a lot of digital identity solutions, and I think that Enza showed you in a great way, what the differences are. Currently at itsme, we're looking at how can we make sure we combine best of both worlds. So let's say the qualities of a centralized solution, identity solutions, and the qualities of decentralized identity solutions, being, let's say, digital wallets that citizens or customers could use to show their attributes when needed. To add to that, we're currently working together with some other partners of ours to make data sharing possible in the same context. So if you're logged in, for example, with itsme, you want to or you need to share data from with a company or with a government, that you can straight go to a trusted source to get that information at that moment in time. So it's real-time data. Share that data with the person or the company that needs it, and after it has been used and approved, the data disappears again. So that makes sure that you as a citizen or customer in full control, you can use the data that's out there about you. And you can also stock that if you want to, of course, in your digital wallet for the long term. But one of the problems with that is stocking information in your digital wallet is the lifecycle management. For example, if you have a driver's license and we could replace the driver's license, the physical one, with a digital one, you could stock that in a digital wallet. The only thing that will be a challenge there is how you make sure that you create a lifecycle management to ensure that you actually still have that attribute and that it's still valid. For example, if you get pulled over by police and they take your driver's license, it could take up, for example, 2 weeks to inform the system and register in the trusted source, but it could still be in a digital wallet. So these are the challenges that Europe are taking up at the moment to see how can they relate digital identities with digital signatures and data sharing, and how can we make sure that we use real-time data just to ensure that everybody has the same kind of data and there are no flaws in this process. Coming back to what I said earlier, they will make a new regulation and create new regulation and directives for these data sharing schemes, and that will be going live, I think, in 2024. So that's a bit of information on how we are looking at the future, where we combine digital identities, digital signatures, and data sharing all at once in one process, making it easier for your client, but also making it really easy for you as a business or a government in providing this. And you can, of course, have all kinds of front ends to connect to this. This could be an app, this could be a website, whatever you can think of, but this is the scheme that will be behind it the coming years from the itsme point of view. So I think coming back to what we said, I think what's important to understand is that we have been involved in the Netherlands since 2008, not only as itsme, but also working closely with Evidos, focusing on what happens in the Netherlands when it comes to digital identity. There's a new law coming out on the 1st of January. It's called the Wet Digitale Overheid. It's focusing on do we allow private identity solution next to the government identity solution? At the moment, we, as itsme, want to go through the accreditation process. As we are Evidos qualified and GDPR qualified, we expect to be qualified by the Dutch government as well. And that would mean that you could use itsme within the public sector in the Netherlands. And I think that's a big step forward. As I mentioned, the full onboarding process within 2 minutes, I think it's really a USP for us, a unique selling point, in a sense that it's really easy to use. We've tested it with a lot of people, even people that don't have a great site, or are not really able to do these kind of things by themselves normally. We tested it and it was still easy for them to do. It will not take 2 minutes, but it won't take a half an hour. It will be done in a few minutes as well. So that's a good asset to have in this case. So we'll be focusing on several verticals in the Netherlands, being banking, government, insurance companies, notaries, logistics, the industry in general, mobility, real estate, energy, and health. That's quite a lot, but we already have some customers in Belgium, but also in other European countries that are also active in the Netherlands. And together with Evidos, we want to make sure we provide the same kind of services to them here in the Netherlands, so that they can offer this to their clients and they can have the same kind of experience that they have in other countries. So the qualified signature will be live from the 1st of October in the Netherlands, and we already have some use cases at governments that want to replace the wet signature by a digital signature on their birth certificates. And we have some other use cases coming up with banks as well. But unfortunately, I can't discuss that currently because we're in the process of determining those use cases. And maybe in the next webinar, we can show you some insights on how we've done that. Yeah, I think the last thing...
Sorry, I need to interrupt a little because of the time. So
yes,
I don't... Are you almost there, or?
Yeah. This is the last slide. So
okay, good.
My last point that I wanted to make, Kik, in this sense, is that if you want to experience itsme yourself, living in the Netherlands or across Europe, if you have an ICAO password, you can now onboard itsme on your phone and test it. And we'll be expanding, as I said, after the Netherlands to probably other countries. But we will keep you posted on that. So for now, thank you for your attention. I know it's a lot of information. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And as Kik mentioned at the start, we will gladly share this presentation for you to discuss among colleagues or just to have for yourself. Thank you, Kik.
Thank you, Arthur. Yes, so I was a little bit looking at the time. Normally we have some spare time to go for a drink or something to eat, but online that's a little bit tricky. I would like to thank Enza and Arthur for joining us in this webinar. As said, we will share the information. If there's anything that wasn't addressed, just let us know so we can follow up later. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed and look forward to see you in our next webinars, because we are working hard to inform you on other market developments and technology standards around identity and signing. So thank you all. Thank you, Enza, again, and look forward to see you all in the next one.
Thank you.